She was the first black woman in history to be nominated for the Academy Award for Best Actress. That was 1955. The year she was nominated, she was also pregnant, with the child of the man who directed her, Otto Preminger, the most powerful director in Hollywood, married to someone else. He didn't leave his wife. The studio told her to end the pregnancy. She did. She never recovered from it. Not from the pregnancy. Not from what happened to her career after. Not from the second marriage that drained everything she had left. Not from the bankruptcy. Not from the day they took her Hollywood Hills house. The house he had helped her buy. The house she had decorated room by room with her own hands. And gave her a small apartment in West Hollywood instead. She was 42 years old when she was found dead in that apartment. She had $2.14 in cash. There is still a house in the Hollywood Hills. Spanish style. Terracotta tiles. Picture windows with an extraordinary view. The listing doesn't mention her name. This is the story of what happened inside that house. Old Money Wives tells the stories the listing didn't include. Subscribe. Because what happened inside that house deserves to be remembered. Before any of this, before the Hollywood Hills house, before Preminger, before the Oscar nomination and the pregnancy and the bankruptcy, before all of it, there was a child being dressed for a stage she had not chosen. Dorothy Dandridge was 5 years old the first time she performed professionally. 5. Her mother, Ruby, had created an act for her two daughters, Dorothy and her sister Vivian, called the Wonder Children. They sang, they danced, they worked church halls and school auditoriums across the American South, riding in a car, sleeping where they could, performing for whatever the room was willing to give. Dorothy was not asked whether she wanted this life. She was placed inside it, and then the door closed, and then the act continued. This is the first thing to understand about Dorothy Dandridge. She had been performing since before she had the language to describe what performing cost. By the time she was a teenager, she had spent more time on stages than off them. By the time she was a young woman, she had learned the primary lesson the industry teaches every woman it needs, that your value is conditional, that it can be granted and revoked, that the room is watching and you had better be worth watching, and that you will not be asked what you need in return. She was not a passive student of this lesson. She received it, and she fought it, daily, in every professional choice she made for the rest of her life. By the mid-1930s, she and Vivian were performing as the Dandridge sisters at the Cotton Club in Harlem. Dorothy was barely a teenager. The Cotton Club was not a place for children. She was brilliant in it anyway, the kind of performer who makes the room stop talking, who has whatever unnamed quality makes strangers lean forward without understanding why. Even then, people tried to categorize what she was, instead of simply acknowledging what she could do. They always tried to categorize her. She was always more than the category. In 1942, at 19, she married Harold Nicholas, one half of the legendary Nicholas brothers, the tap dancers whose footwork, captured on film, still looks physically impossible 70 years later. It was a glamorous marriage. It was also a painful one, almost from the beginning. Harold was away constantly, reportedly unfaithful, present in the way that men who are married to their own careers are present, in name, occasionally in body, rarely in the ways that matter. Their daughter, Harolyn Suzanne, called Lynn, was born in 1943. The delivery was complicated. Doctors believed oxygen deprivation during birth had caused irreversible brain damage. Lynn would never speak. She would never live independently. Dorothy blamed herself. This is important enough to say plainly. She blamed herself for a tragedy she did not cause, and she carried that guilt for the remaining 22 years of her life. It shaped every financial decision she made, every performance she pushed through when she was exhausted, every time she accepted a situation she should have walked away from because leaving would cost money, and money was what kept Lynn in care. She and Harold divorced in 1951. She was 28 years old, single mother, disabled daughter, a career that had not yet become what it needed to be. She went back to nightclubs, not because she preferred them, but because they paid immediately and she needed money immediately. She played the Waldorf Astoria's Empire Room in New York, the Macambo in Los Angeles, venues that had historically refused black performers until Dorothy Dandridge arrived and made refusing her the more expensive option. She opened doors by walking through them before the industry had decided whether to unlock them. She was the most glamorous woman in any room she entered. She knew exactly what a gown was for. It was armor. It was leverage. It was the only negotiating tool she had complete control over, and she deployed it with the precision of a woman who had understood since childhood that her appearance was a professional instrument, not vanity, not performance for its own sake, but a survival mechanism dressed in silk. By 1953, she had her first real film lead, Bright Road, opposite Harry Belafonte. She played a schoolteacher. She was extraordinary in it. The film was modest enough that Hollywood noticed her without feeling threatened by her. That balance, she would learn, was everything. The moment the industry felt threatened, the doors that had opened began to close. Then came Carmen Jones and Otto Preminger, and the beginning of everything. Preminger was directing an all-black production of the Bizet opera for 20th Century Fox. He had initially considered Dorothy for the small role of Cindy Lou, the good girl, the passive one. The woman left standing when Carmen walks out. Dorothy laughed in his face. She told him she could play a hellcat or a nun. She wanted Carmen, not because Carmen was simply a better role, though it was, but because Dorothy Dandridge understood, in her bones, that being cast as the woman left behind was not just a career choice. It was a statement about what she was permitted to be. And she refused it. He tested her. She showed up deliberately unglamorous, no armor, no performance of herself as a star. And she inhabited Carmen Jones so completely, so immediately, that Preminger gave her the part without hesitation. She did not yet understand the full price of winning it. She crossed the threshold of that production, believing she was arriving. She did not yet understand that the door she was walking through was already designed to close behind her. He paid the down payment on the Hollywood Hills house. Remember that, because it means the house that looked like her achievement was built on a financial foundation she did not control. From the first day she walked through that wrought iron gate and into the sunken living room with the picture windows overlooking the canyon, the house was already built on terms she had not set. This is how Otto Preminger operated. And this is the first thing the house held that nobody remarked on when they came to see the view. On set, he was a tyrant, documented, widely known, feared by nearly everyone who worked under him. Actors and crew called him Otto the Terrible. He shouted. He humiliated. He demanded a kind of absolute compliance that had less to do with artistic standards than with his need to be the most powerful person in any room at every moment. On the Carmen Jones set, he bullied nearly everyone, except Pearl Bailey, who bullied back, and Dorothy, who absorbed it in public and gave it back to him in private. She didn't yell on set. Her best friend, Jerry Branton, said it plainly. Dorothy gave him hell for 2 weeks off set. She didn't yell back on camera. She was professional. She was what the production required. She had been trained since age 5 to be what the production required, and she was very good at it. And that skill cost her more than it ever gave back. This was the first rule of the household he designed for her. Whatever he does in public, you contain in private. The second rule was presence by permission. He was still married to Mary Gardner, and there was no negotiation about that. They could not appear together publicly unless they were promoting a film. No dinners in restaurants, no photographs that weren't professional. He came to the Hollywood Hills house. He did not arrive at the Hollywood Hills house. There is a difference between those two things, and Dorothy lived inside that difference every single day. He visited. He did not stay. He was present in the way that powerful men arrange to be present when presence costs them nothing, warmly, temporarily, on a schedule that served his life rather than hers. The third rule, the most expensive one, was career guidance. After Carmen Jones made her an Oscar nominee, the studio came to her with projects, multiple offers, real opportunities. Preminger told her to hold out. He said the roles were not worthy of her nomination. He advised her, project after project, to wait for something better. And because he had made her, because he had given her Carmen, and Carmen had given her everything, she listened. She trusted his judgment, the way you trust someone who has already proven they know something you need. Which is to say, beyond what the evidence actually warranted, beyond what was safe. The house had rules. She had not been shown them before she agreed to live by them. What the household required, in practice, that she perform contentment in public, that she perform deference on set, that she decline roles on his advice while her window of opportunity quietly contracted, and that she do all of this while also being the most luminous woman in any room, because the luminosity was what kept him interested, and his interest was what kept her career viable. Or so the design of the household required her to believe. She was not a foolish woman. She was an extraordinarily intelligent woman inside a structure that had been deliberately built to make her intelligence work against her. She would feel the walls. She would sense the design. Then he would come to the house. Warm, brilliant, entirely certain of himself. And the glimpse would close. He couldn't get me out of his system, she said later. Nor could he make any proposals of substance to me. Neither a new film nor marriage. That sentence contains everything. Read it slowly. It sits in the sunken living room like furniture she never chose. It sits on the side table next to the telephone. It is the sentence the house was built around, and she lived in it for 4 years before she fully understood what she was living in. A morning in the Hollywood Hills house, 1955. She wakes before she needs to. This is not a luxury habit. It is a survival one, built into her body from decades of being the person in the room who had to be ready before everyone else. She makes her own breakfast. The housekeeper is there. She makes breakfast anyway. The kitchen is the one room she does not perform in. It is simply hers. The first call of the day is about Lynn. Her daughter is in private care. Expensive, constant, required. Dorothy talks to the caretaker. She asks specific questions. She listens carefully. She adjusts her schedule around what Lynn needs this week, which means she adjusts her budget around it too, which means she does the private arithmetic of a woman who is a film star by public measurement and financially precarious by private reality. Those two things are both true simultaneously. The house understands the first one. Only Dorothy knows the second. She hangs up the phone. She sits for a moment. Then she gets dressed. She dresses as if the room is watching, because the room has always been watching. Because since the age of 5, she has understood that being watched is the only currency the industry offers women who look like her. The ritual of it, foundation, the precise line of the eye, the final adjustment of the hair, is one of the few acts in her day that belongs entirely to her. Nobody directed her to do it this way. Nobody choreographed the precision. This is hers. She goes to a lunch, a professional one, orchestrated by her manager Earl Mills, who is genuinely in her corner and cannot always protect her from the things she cannot yet see clearly enough to name. At lunch, she is charming. She is warm. She is exactly the Dorothy Dandridge the industry needs her to be at this particular moment. When the Oscar nomination is recent enough to still be a credential, and recent enough to not yet be only a credential. Someone mentions a film. She says she is in discussions with her director about timing. This is the language the household has given her for. He has told me to wait, and I am waiting. She says it smoothly. She has practiced it. It sounds like confidence. It is the opposite of confidence. It is a woman translating the terms of her captivity into the language of a career. She returns to the house in the afternoon. He is not there. He has a wife. He has a life that exists entirely outside this house, and this house is where their arrangement lives. And their arrangement does not include him being present on an ordinary Tuesday afternoon when there is no film to promote and no performance required of either of them. She sits at the picture windows. The view is genuinely extraordinary. The canyon, the hills, the city arranged below her in the late afternoon light like a set she has not been given permission to enter. She has earned this view. She has performed her way to it and paid for it with a decade of discipline and a childhood she did not choose, and a marriage that cost her more than it gave back, and a daughter whose care she will provide for as long as she can manage the arithmetic. The view does not know any of this. It is simply a view. He comes in the evening, or he doesn't. On the evenings he doesn't. She eats alone in the dining room she has decorated herself. She drinks more than she used to. This is new enough to notice and not new enough to name. The pills are there. Sleeping aids, something to manage what the body accumulates when it is required to absorb, without complaint, day after day, without acknowledgement and without rest. She goes to bed. The house settles around her. The beautiful room. The picture windows facing the dark canyon. The telephone on the side table, silent now, exactly as it was all afternoon. She has done everything the household required today. She has performed contentment in public and deference professionally, and warmth at the lunch and certainty about a career that is contracting around her one declined offer at a time. She has paid for Lynn's care and managed the arithmetic and dressed with precision and been luminous enough to keep the arrangement alive. Tomorrow, the household will require it again. Every hour of that day, something the household required. Nothing dramatic, everything cumulative. The living room was sunken, 3 steps down from the entry hall, a 1920s architectural choice that made the room feel, from the moment you descended into it, like a stage. The ceiling was high. The picture windows ran floor to ceiling along the south wall. When the afternoon light came through them, the room went golden in a way that visitors always mentioned when they described it. Dorothy had furnished it herself, chosen every piece, placed every object with an eye that was equal parts interior decorator and actress. She knew how a space reads. She knew what a room tells people before anyone in it has spoken. When guests came, she stood in that room and gave them exactly what they had come to see. She was warm. She was witty. She made you feel, when she was talking to you, that you were the most interesting person she had encountered in some time. This is an extraordinary skill and also a professional discipline, and Dorothy Dandridge had been executing it since she was old enough to read a room. She had done it on stages at the Cotton Club. She had done it at the Waldorf Astoria. She did it here, in her own living room, for guests who came to admire the house and the woman in it, and went home having seen exactly what the woman in it needed them to see. What they did not know, in that golden room, was what the room was for. They did not know that the career she implied, the film star in mid-trajectory, the Oscar nominee with an abundant future, was already being quietly redirected by a man who was not there. They did not know that the warmth she gave them was the same warmth she was required to produce whether she felt it or not, that the performance had no off switch, that the house required it even when there were no guests, because she had been inside the performance so long she could no longer always locate the boundary between the performance and herself. The room held this for years. Nobody who sat in it asked what it cost her to keep it running. Her dressing room, adjacent to the master bedroom. Her things arranged in their specific order. Gowns organized by occasion. Makeup set out with the precision of someone for whom the ritual of preparation has always been the only hour of the day that belongs entirely to her. This is where the calls about Lynn happened, away from guests, away from the performance of the public rooms. This is where the private arithmetic happened. What Lynn's care costs this month, what the nightclub booking pays, whether the numbers close, whether they will close next month, whether the career that should have expanded after Carmen Jones will expand before the arithmetic stops working. He did not come to this room. He came to the house. He was present in the public rooms, the drawing room, the dining room, the sunken living room with the view, the rooms that could accommodate a man who needed to be able to leave without explaining why. This room was hers in a way he could not easily enter, which may be why it was also the room that held what no other room in the house could hold. Her actual face behind the one the household required, the one that was tired, the one that had been performing since before she had words for what performing meant. What she felt in this room, in the silence after the calls about Lynn, after the arithmetic closed or didn't close, after the day's performance was over and there was no audience left to perform for. That did not get spoken out loud. Not in this house. Not to the man who came and went on the terms he had set. The household did not have space for it out loud. This room held it instead. This room held everything the public rooms could not. It was the afternoon light room, the golden one, 3 steps down. In 1955, Dorothy Dandridge became pregnant with Otto Preminger's child. According to her manager Earl Mills, whose account appears in multiple historical records, including reporting cited by the American Film Institute, Preminger refused to marry her. Fox studio executives made clear that Dorothy Dandridge's value to them was contingent on her remaining a particular kind of symbol, and a pregnancy did not fit that symbol. The pregnancy was ended by a Beverly Hills physician. Her closest friend, Jerry Branton, disputed this account. Dorothy's own autobiography does not mention it. What is documented without dispute is this: the relationship with Preminger ended. Dorothy was bitter. The future the household had implied was possible. The marriage, the films, the life she had been building toward was confirmed in 1955 to have been a design she was living inside of rather than a life she was actually building. The household had made her a promise it was never going to keep. The room where she processed this was the same room where she had performed wholeness for guests who came to see the view. The same golden room, now without guests. Now just her and the windows and the city below that had briefly decided she mattered. What the light looked like in that room on that specific afternoon, what the canyon smelled like through the glass, what sound the house made around her while she sat with what she now understood, is not recorded anywhere. What she did after is recorded. She kept going. She booked nightclub performances. She did the arithmetic for Lynn. She got dressed and stood in front of rooms and was what the rooms required. The room absorbed what happened in it. That is what the room was for. By 1963, Dorothy Dandridge filed for bankruptcy. Her debts exceeded $100,000. A failed oil investment had taken the bulk of her savings, money placed with managers she had trusted, because trusting people had seemed, given everything, like the reasonable alternative to trusting no one. Her second husband, Jack Dennison, a Las Vegas nightclub owner she had married in June 1959, less than 2 years after the affair with Preminger ended, had spent what remained. He managed money she earned and made financial decisions she later could not account for. She divorced him in 1962 and found herself holding the bill for the arithmetic he had arranged. On the day she was evicted from the Hollywood Hills house, her daughter Lynn was returned to her. Grown now, still unable to speak, still requiring the constant care that Dorothy no longer had the money to provide. She placed Lynn in a state institution. She took a small apartment at 8495 Fountain Avenue in West Hollywood. One bedroom, no canyon view, no picture windows, no sunken living room where the light goes golden in the afternoon. The Hollywood Hills house was eventually sold, restored. A listing describes it as a restored 1920s Mediterranean with extraordinary views from every room. Formal entry to a lavish living room with fireplace. Exquisite formal dining room. The designer spared no expense. The listing does not say her name. I found that listing, standing in the photographs of what the space became. The renovated floors, the same south-facing windows, the same 3 steps down into the same room. Something does not leave. Whatever a room absorbs, it does not release to a renovation. The new owners can bring their furniture and their warmth and their own accumulated lives, and the room will hold all of it without any of them knowing what it was holding before they arrived. The house is still standing. Every room still holds what happened in it. Houses do not forget. It was not that he refused. It was that the household refused. He was only part of it. The thing she was inside was larger than any one man, and she understood this more clearly each time she tried to change it from inside, and watched the household absorb the attempt so completely that almost nothing remained of what she had tried. She had done this once, and it had worked. She had stood in front of Preminger and said, "I can play a hellcat or a nun. Give me Carmen." And he had given her Carmen. And Carmen Jones had given her the first Academy Award nomination in the history of American cinema for a black woman in a leading role. She believed this was the method, that her refusal to be diminished, her insistence on the role that matched what she actually was, could be applied consistently, and the household would continue to respond the way it had responded the first time. She continued insisting. She turned down roles she considered beneath her. She had a documented policy. No slave roles. No domestic servitude. The industry in the mid-1950s offered black women roles that were predominantly domestic, diminished, and decorative, and Dorothy refused them. Not out of arrogance, out of an understanding, hard-won and deeply held, that what she played on screen was what the culture was permitted to imagine about women who looked like her. She was protecting something larger than her career. The household did not recognize the distinction. The household absorbed this attempt by making her refusal cost her work instead of earning her better work. The roles she turned down went to other women. The roles she held out for were never offered. Preminger continued advising her to wait, and Dorothy sat in the Hollywood Hills house. The house built on his money, decorated with her hands, declining projects on the advice of a man who was not declining anything himself. He was working, he was directing, he was building his legacy on the career she had given him by being extraordinary in his film. She was waiting. She maintained her dignity. She lost years. In June 1959, she married Jack Dennison. Understand what this was an attempt to build: a household on different terms, one in which a man was present legally and publicly, in restaurants, in photographs, in the daylight hours of an ordinary life. One that did not require her to be invisible unless a film was being promoted. One in which she was a wife, rather than an arrangement. One she could actually show people. Denison was charming. He was also, by the accounts of everyone who watched the marriage closely, a man who understood exactly what Dorothy Dandridge's name was worth and intended to extract that value as systematically as possible. He managed money she had earned. He made decisions she later could not account for. He was, in the language of every woman who watched it happen from the outside, not good to her. That phrase, not good to her, is the language women use when they know the full truth and have decided to say the version that can be lived with. He was not good to her. The full version of what that meant came out in the bankruptcy filing. The household absorbed this attempt by reproducing, in a different architecture, the same essential structure. A woman who had extended trust and access to a man, and a man who used that trust in ways that served himself rather than her. Different man. Same design. The household did not require him to be Otto Preminger. It only required him to be someone she had let inside the gate. She divorced him in 1962. She was left with debt that exceeded $100,000 and a career that had contracted to nightclub bookings. What this attempt cost her beyond the attempt itself: the house, the savings, and the arithmetic she had been managing for Lynn. After the Denison divorce, Dorothy was rebuilding. She had nightclub bookings. She was always working because she had always needed to work. Because the arithmetic for Lynn never stopped. Because the body keeps requiring performance long after the household has decided it no longer needs the performer. She signed a contract for her autobiography. $10,000 advance. Her story, in her own words. She was in conversations about new projects. Her manager, Earl Mills, believed something was close. People around her in 1965 said she seemed like someone who was going to make it through to the other side. She was making plans. Specific plans. The Las Vegas Lounge Act, new bookings, the autobiography. She had a fractured foot, but she was recovering from it. She was preparing. The household used her body to stop this attempt. The fractured foot required medication, barbiturates, and underneath the fractured foot was a decade of sleeping aids and alcohol and the accumulated weight of what a body carries when it has been required to perform without rest and without acknowledgement and without the life it was supposed to be building. And something in that accumulation, on September 8th, 1965, reached a point it could not come back from. Whether what happened that morning in the apartment at 8495 Fountain Avenue was accidental or intentional has never been definitively established. What is established is that she was making plans, and the plans stopped. She wrote her autobiography while she was still alive. She called it Everything and Nothing. She wrote it with her own hands, in her own voice. She paid for what she chose to protect. She did not write plainly about the pregnancy, possibly to protect him, possibly because some griefs are simply too close to survive being named on a page. She wrote what she could write, and what she wrote was the truth as fully as she could bear to tell it. It was not published until 1970, 5 years after her death. Publishers gave it a subtitle, The Dorothy Dandridge Tragedy. Her own story, in her own words, released into the world, wearing a title that named her life as a tragedy in the possessive. Her tragedy. As if it were something she had brought with her, rather than something constructed around her, room by room, rule by rule. She was not there to say, "That is not the title I would have chosen." She was not there to correct it. She was not there to sit in front of any room and be what the room required, and then go home to the house she no longer had. The household absorbed even the attempt to speak, by making sure she was not alive to speak it where it could be heard. The sunken living room holds this too: the picture windows, the telephone on the side table, all of it. On September 8th, 1965, Dorothy Dandridge was found dead in her apartment at 8495 Fountain Avenue in West Hollywood. She was 42 years old. She had $2.14 in cash. Approximately $14,000 remained in a pension fund she had never been able to access. That was everything. The accumulated financial residue of a career that had included an Academy Award nomination, a Life magazine cover that made her the first black woman to appear on it, performances at the Waldorf Astoria and the Mocambo and nightclubs across 2 continents, and a Hollywood Hills house that someone else's money had helped buy. She had been the first black woman nominated for the Academy Award for Best Actress. The next would not come for 30 years. Whoopi Goldberg, 1985. 30 years. The gap between them is not a coincidence. It is a measurement of what the industry was willing to build and how long it was willing to let that building stand empty before it tried again. The Hollywood Hills house had its own life after Dorothy left it. The terracotta roof tiles were maintained. The bougainvillea on the south wall continued to climb in those colors that look, from the road, almost theatrical. The wrought iron gate stayed. The sunken living room stayed. The picture windows that the listing calls extraordinary stayed, because windows don't leave when the people who earned them do. The house was restored. A new kitchen, renovated floors, a listing that described a lavish living room with fireplace, an exquisite formal dining room, extraordinary views from every room. The listing noted that the designer had spared no expense. The listing did not mention Dorothy. This is not unusual. Houses do not carry their histories in their listings. They carry their square footage and their view orientation and their proximity to good schools, and the rest of what they hold stays inside the walls where it has always stayed, absorbed and undeclared, waiting for someone who knows what they're looking for. Now return to the house. The telephone on the side table near the picture windows, the one nobody remarked on when they came to see the view. It sat there through the years of the affair, and the years after the affair, through the years when the film offers should have come and didn't, through 1955 and what 1955 held, through the bankruptcy and the eviction, and all the afternoons when the canyon light came through the windows, and the city below arranged itself into the shape of a future she was not going to get to have. Now you know what that telephone was. It was the instrument of the household's promise and the proof of the household's failure. It rang when it rang, and it was silent when it was silent. And she could not make it do either one on her terms because the household did not operate on her terms. It was the most domestic object in the house. It sat on a side table. It waited. It was there in everything. The instruments of a household's destruction are almost always domestic. They sit on tables. They ring when they choose to. They go quiet without explanation. They do not announce themselves as evidence. They simply become evidence over time once you know what you are looking at. The house is still standing. The listing still describes extraordinary views. The listing does not mention Dorothy. What the household passed on: a measurement. Halle Berry played Dorothy in the 1999 HBO film Introducing Dorothy Dandridge. She received an Emmy Award for the performance. 2 years later, Berry stood at the Academy Awards podium and became the first black woman to win Best Actress. She was crying before she reached the microphone. She cited the women who had come before her. She knew exactly who she was citing: Dorothy Dandridge had to die for that lineage to be clearly visible. This is what the household passes on when it is done with a woman. Her absence becomes the proof of what she was. While she was alive, the household could manage the narrative. The silence about the career that wasn't materializing, the waiting, the advice to hold out for something better that never arrived, the arrangement that could not be photographed. Once she was gone, the gap she left behind was the exact shape of what had been taken from her. Perfectly, painfully legible. Impossible to misread once you knew what you were looking at. Her autobiography was published 5 years after her death. The title the publishers chose, Everything and Nothing, The Dorothy Dandridge Tragedy, is its own document of how the household survives the people inside it. It names her life as a tragedy in the possessive, her tragedy, as if it belonged to her, as if it was something she had brought with her, carried in from Cleveland, packed in the car with Vivian when Ruby took them south to perform for whatever the room was willing to give, rather than something constructed around her, room by room, rule by rule, by an industry that needed her to be a particular kind of symbol, and a man who needed her to be available, and a studio that needed her to be controllable, and a financial structure that ensured she was never entirely standing on ground she owned. What the household passed to whoever came after. The knowledge that this could happen to you. That being brilliant enough to make the industry need you does not protect you. That being the first black woman nominated for the highest award in American cinema does not protect you. That the house offered in exchange for that brilliance is not the same thing as a life, and that understanding the difference, too late, inside a structure designed to prevent that understanding from arriving in time, is not a personal failure. It is a design. What the household holds that has never been formally acknowledged, the full accounting, not the bankruptcy filing, not the death record, not the star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame, placed there years after she could walk it. The full accounting of what a decade of deliberately deferred opportunity costs a woman when that woman is Dorothy Dandridge in 1950s Hollywood. The full accounting of what it costs to carry a guilt you did not earn for 22 years, while you pay for care you cannot afford, while you perform wholeness in a golden room, while the room is being quietly arranged to close around you. No institution has done that accounting. Dorothy Jean Dandridge. Born November 9th, 1922, in Cleveland, Ohio. Died September 8th, 1965, in West Hollywood, California, age 42. Buried at Forest Lawn Memorial Park in Glendale. Her mother, Ruby, is buried beside her. There is still a house in the Hollywood Hills, the sunken living room, the picture windows, the view across the canyon that visitors always remarked on, that the listing calls extraordinary, that the afternoon light still moves across every day, whether anyone is watching it or not. On a side table near the window, where the light falls longest. The telephone,